Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It's Thursday night. It's the show I look forward to the most. It's with Supermac and John Gibson. How are you doing, lads?
We're good. All right, Mal?
Yeah. How are you, John?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Cooking on gas.
Good stuff, John. Are you running the book, John, for when Malcolm lets his dogs out tonight?
I am, absolutely. And I'm going to go for 26 minutes for the first time and 45 minutes for the second time.
I mean, people obviously don't know, but we've recorded a special edition of the show looking back at Malcolm's England career. John and I and Malcolm and I did it on Monday. And as you know, Malcolm's had a few issues with his computer, which is a bit of a nightmare. We think we've cracked it. We think we know what the crack is. He's took it to a computer expert, but we had a right laugh, didn't we, Monday? We tried to do a 1 hour show. It took us about 1 hour 55 to do.
The point is, I'm not certain that Malcolm had to go to the computer expert. I think he should have gone to the dog and cat shelter and got the dog for it.
Well, anyway, it causes plenty of amusement. And as I said, I think qtechshop.co.uk, who make our T-shirts next week for the Food Bank T-shirt, I think he's going to make a picture of Malcolm with who let Malcolm's dogs out or something along those lines. So hopefully that makes a few quid. Mark Byers has got 626. Barry Hogan says 36 minutes for Malcolm. Paul Oxley says 1832. Chipper says 6:30. Dave Harrison says 1831. And Stu says, evening gentlemen, Bruce out. No change from Stu. Let's talk about COVID first, guys. Not something that we've really talked about, but I suppose we've got to because, you know, it's hit our club and it's hit our club badly. We had our game postponed, of course, in the last round of fixtures. But there seems to be brighter news at St James's and at the training ground. The players have been allowed back in. There was an upbeat photograph, as NUFC.com has described it, on the official website today, with Matt Ritchie on looking forward to facing West Brom this weekend. Callum Wilson is talking quite positively on social media, but we still really don't know who's had it, Malcolm, and we don't know who's going to be fit and who's going to play, but it looks as if our game is going to go ahead at the weekend. And, I suppose we'll find out at Steve Bruce's press conference who's fit.
Yeah, we'll find out who's fit, but we really don't want to be telling West Brom who's had it. You know, that's something I think they should keep quiet and secret within St James Park. There's a thing in football dressing rooms that you look at the opposition and what's happened to them over the last week, and anybody who's had a bit of a knock and has been on the injury table with under the physio for most of that time, you actually talk about concentrating on putting that fella under duress. Putting him under pressure throughout the whole game, and we don't want that happening to Newcastle players. And West Bromwich Albion right now, they must be looking for any trick that they can get up to try and steal a point from somewhere.
Yep, John, it's the usual. I don't know, how can I put it? Trying to think of a country that keeps things secret. North Korea. It's the usual North Korea kind of attitude from the club. You know, said very little. Is it down to medical privacy, do you think? Is that the case? Is that the reason?
I do. I think we have many occasions where we can smack the club. I'm not certain that this is one of them, because medically I think the Premier League, and although individual high-profile cases have come out elsewhere in the country, the idea is you don't tell for the sake of it goes beyond the player, doesn't it? It's his family, his wife, his kids in school, etc., etc. Do you want to say that there's a COVID problem in the house, etc., etc.? And we haven't known, and I don't think that Steve Bruce's press conference will tell us anything on the COVID situation apart from a bland across the board talk about the situation. For example, we do believe that's the reason Isaac Hayden didn't play at Crystal Palace in the last game, because he was one of the early COVID guys. I think there was 3 of them then. We know that Steve Agnew before that was missing off the touchline, and again that was supposed to be the reason. Hayden, because he was one of the early guys with the COVID situation, will be available, I believe, this weekend. But from my point of view, boys, when I look at the Newcastle team, and this is both not meant to be too nasty, but we're wondering who's available, who's not available. I think as long as 2 players are definitely available, and one is Callum Wilson and the other is Carl Darlow, I think the rest are much of a muchness. And if somebody's missing out of centre midfield, then he can be replaced by somebody else who's equally good, or some cynics would say equally bad, as one another. I don't think that you suffer too much by losing individuals. If you didn't have Callum Wilson, you would be in big, big trouble. But we know, because he's said something on social media, that he's fit. And if you didn't have Darlow, you'd be in big trouble, because Dubrovka is not fit yet. And you would have Gillespie, who's the 3rd choice keeper, who hasn't played in the Premier League yet and had that unfortunate situation at Newport when he let in a bad goal early on. But that happens with goalkeepers. But as long as the goalkeeper's fit and as long as the centre forward's fit, I think we can mix and match anywhere else, because the 2 Longstaffs, Shelby, Hayden, Hendrick, if you pick 2 out of those 4 or 6, it ain't going to change much, because they're as good as each other or as average as each other. And the same would apply at fullback, and the same would apply out wide. So give me those 2 guys there, and I'll take whatever else is thrown at us. And no doubt we will be talking about West Brom later. But just to say, Newcastle United, no excuses, kids. We've had COVID. It hasn't been good. But that's not an excuse for beating this side, because this side is woeful, man. So I don't want us giving an excuse. We're terrified of our own shadow, never mind the opposition, Newcastle United. So I don't want COVID and what's happened in the last fortnight to be a problem there. But I don't think we'll actually see the actual composition of the team in terms of the illness until an hour before the kickoff on Saturday.
Fair enough. Okay, we await with bated breath Steve Bruce's press conference, and let's hope we've got those 2 players, as John rightly says, Darlow and Wilson, fit and available. We will, of course, look at the West Brom game a little bit later. Malcolm, there is a couple of questions coming in, and I don't mind taking people's questions, especially this week when there's not a great deal to talk about with regards to Newcastle current day. John, who of course runs our one of our sponsors, qtechshop.co.uk. Malcolm, can you remember what happened in the build-up of play just before your collision that led to the injury on your home debut? You told the story but missed a bit out. Liverpool at home, Malcolm, your home debut. What was there anything that happened? Any that I've forgotten?
Well, the incident started with Ray Clements duffing his kick.
That's it, yeah.
From his hands. And Ray Clements, the surprising thing was that he duffed it, because he was one of the sweetest strikers of a ball that you could ever wish to meet. You know, his left foot was absolutely superb. It was as good, if not better, than outfielders. And he duffed this goal kick, and it came straight at me. So I swear that he duffed it purposely. I'd scored a hat-trick. He didn't like people scoring goals against him, particularly hat-tricks. And so this goal kick was duffed. It came at me. It was bobbling all over the place, and I went to control it, but it went up in the air over Larry Lloyd, and I ran past him. And the next thing, Ray Clements was coming steaming out off his line. So I just had the feeling, the more I think about it, that he did it on purpose. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Did he not like you in England training, like big man, later on?
He never worked with me in training. he sort of always avoided me, and I finished working all of the time with Peter Shilton, who was a training fanatic. He couldn't, he just wanted to be between the sticks, having people firing shots at him all day long. But that suited me because I was happy to keep working on my shooting all the while. But it was a strange thing to be in a room with all the other England players and Ray Clements. It sort of looked at me from under his brow, and there was never any real social contact between he and I at all. Not that I wanted it.
John Mitchelson asks a question as well. He says, hi all, a question to Malcolm. When Keith Birkinshaw picked the team to face Liverpool, did Harvey not question his decision not to play Barraclough? It probably cost Newcastle a final. This is, of course, a special programme that we did a couple of weeks ago, looking at the wonderful cup run in the 70s. But, of course, the final at Wembley against Liverpool didn't go our way in the second half, it has to be said. But, yeah, I mean, just a question on that, Malcolm, which again, we probably didn't cover on the show. That's why John's asking.
Yeah, I understand the question and the reason for it. I don't know what Joe Harvey said, because if he said anything, it would have been said in private. And what you have to remember is that in a dressing room, because one or two of the players, me in particular, questioned this, because it was changing the whole format of the side. We had always played with an out-and-out winger. Keith Birkinshaw was telling us that we had to play with a very narrow back four, and we were saying, well, it's going to leave huge space down either flank. What do you want us to do? Go and mark the fullbacks and stop them from going? Which would have stopped John Tudor and I from playing a normal and natural game, and so, but you have to be so careful when you're building up to a game, and a hugely important game at that, and in the dressing room you can't stick on that one subject because it doesn't have any relation to what's actually going to be happening on the Saturday afternoon. You're questioning the reason why it's happening. And what you need to do is take a positive aspect to it and get talking with everybody and hear what the coach has got to say in an effort for you, that you can get those 10 outfield players all well and truly understanding what's to be taking place and how to make the very most of it. But I think the question marks were always there, even when we went out onto the Wembley turf. We had these question marks in our heads. We were playing in a situation that we had just never had before. Never had before.
I've got to laugh at this, Malcolm. I'll read this out. It's in a few parts, but Dodo Bird has sent in this few-part message. It says, "Hi, Steve. I actually met Malcolm many years ago when he personally sold me a beautiful leather jacket, which was on sale at his boutique in Newcastle. I said it felt a bit tight as I tried it on, but buy at least 2 sizes. He said, no, that's perfect in the way it should be worn, and leather stretches anyway. Assured by this, I went ahead and bought it. I wore it on the way home, but by the time I got there, the back seam had come apart around the shoulders also. He personally answered the phone when I explained what had happened, and he said, no problem, bring it back in and I'll exchange it. Unfortunately, he didn't have a replacement jacket, and he persuaded me alternatively to exchange it for 2 pairs of trousers, which I did not want nor need. I won't forget as he opened the door as I left that I'd been duped as he waved goodbye from behind the glass plate door. A certain wry smile confirmed it. Supermac, super footballer, super salesman. Don't know that. That is a good story. The question is, did the pants fall apart?
PJ Proby, he was PJ Proby. I mean, Malcolm used to sell dummies to the centre halves in his days. Never mind the bloke coming in his shop.
That's a great. I love stories like that, which have got absolutely nothing to do with football. It's super. Dodo Bird, thanks for sharing that. Malcolm, any comment on that?
Well, I wish I could remember the incident and the situation, but sadly I can't. Then I would be able to comment on the veracity of what we're being told here.
In the words of Freddie Shepherd, buyer beware. That's what you always.
Absolutely.
He wasn't when we signed Michael Owen, unfortunately.
Alan Thompson, good evening, mate. He says, question, Malcolm and John. Pundits say Bruce, brilliant job. Arteta, brilliant job. Roy Hodgson, brilliant job. Which manager then has done better than brilliant?
All the rest. I was going to say, if to be truthful, all these guys have done brilliant jobs. They're 13 or below. So in the table at the moment, I did an article this week saying it's quite amazing. You know, we think we are staggering from crisis to crisis, that our tactics are poor, that we don't have the right stats on possession, etc., etc. And yet Arsenal are 1 point and 2 places beneath us, with the manager who's supposed to be going to be one of the great tactical brains of the future in Arteta, etc. It may well change, but that is the current situation, and it's quite amazing. I tell you, the one manager who isn't doing brilliant is the one that's up here on Saturday, who were told in certain quarters that if he doesn't beat Newcastle, could get the sack, because he doesn't get on with the owner of the club. Does that remind you anything about, let me throw 2 names at you, maybe Rafa Benitez and Mike Ashley, maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
Very similar. It sounds very similar, but Rafa, I think, was doing a better job on the pitch.
Yes, he was, without the shadow of doubt.
Yeah, it's a good time to play them, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it is, yes.
Yeah, they need to get the game. They need to get the game on. Tom's asking Malcolm, do you think Bruce is better playing the 4-4-2 formation? I mean, obviously we had success with that. Joe Linton and Wilson linked up well in the last game. Do you think he should stick with that, or do you think he should twist and go back to one up top?
No. I am so anti one up front. If you play one up front, you've got an extra man somewhere else. He's either in the back 4 making 5, or in the middle 4 making 5, and that tells me that you've got players who can't play, and they've got to crowd it with numbers to cover up for them. You know, and good players, really good players. When the manager says, right, we're going to play a back 5, you just say, no, you're not. No, you're not. We're not playing 5. We don't need a 5th man. And the same in midfield. You know, midfielders should put their hand up and say, no. Because at the same time, midfielders, you have 5 midfielders across there. Whenever the ball drops at the feet of any of them and they look forward, they've got 1 man up front as a target, just 1. No matter what movement he makes, he's running from one to another of a back 4. For me, it's crazy. And the only reason why you play 5 at the back is because you've got a right duffer somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're covering for him. It would be better to play 4 and leave that man out and bring somebody else in. That's the way to do it.
Okay, John, there's a question for you on the screen from Joe Walker. He says, what's the most enjoyable and most difficult Newcastle story that you've written?
Well, that That's a great question, and I would have to give it a lot of thought to be able to answer it for definite.
Oh, come on,
But I
John,
mean,
you've only written
having said that,
50,000 stories.
off the top of my head, and this might make some people smile. One of the most difficult ones I had to write of recent times was on the appointment of Steve Bruce, because Bushy had been a pal of mine for years, in as much as I was brought up with Wallsend Boys Club, doing an awful lot of work down there with Steve Dale, and before that with Peter Kirkley, etc. I loved Wallsend Boys Club. I went every year. I knew all the old players there, and I knew Steve Bruce and Peter Beardsley when they were kids there, going away trying to find a club, and neither of them could. And I knew him through all his wonderful time with Manchester United, and I was very grateful when he was man of the match for Norwich against Sunderland in the League Cup final and duffed up old Sunderland so they didn't win a trophy. I was grateful too for that. Now, when he was in the running for the Newcastle United job, I was praying that he didn't get it, because I thought it was a bad fit. It wasn't good for Steve Bruce, and it certainly wasn't good for Newcastle United. He did get the Newcastle United job, and I was asked by the office to write a comment piece on it, on his appointment, and it was with a very sad heart that I wrote that I didn't think it was a good appointment either for the man or for Newcastle United. And I take no glee in saying, has it worked out that way or has it not? That is for the individual to decide, but it was a tough thing to write, because he was a good friend of mine, but I don't think that should get in the way of my professional judgment. A personal relationship is different from a professional judgment. But he came up here as a good pal. His coach was Steve Agnew, who I give Steve his first coaching job when he played for me at Gateshead and was a player for me at Gateshead, and I made him Gateshead's coach. That's the first coaching job he ever had, and he's ended up coaching Newcastle United. So it was very difficult for me to give my opinion, but I honestly believe that if I was asked my professional opinion, I had to divert myself away from friendship and give it. And I know a lot of people haven't done that with Steve. A lot of people have just supported him blindly because he's a pal. I don't think that that's professional for a professional person. So that was a difficult story to write. The great stories to write have almost written themselves, like semi-finals of cups when Malcolm scored 2 against Burnley, while Alan Shearer got us through 2 semi-finals successive years in the 90s, when we won the Fairs Cup, possibly because I'm the only one still working that can remember that. They were wonderful stories to write, and you wrote them with great heart. A lot of the stories I did with Bobby Robson when I went out to Porto to sit with him, and he told me about fighting cancer, which was very, very early on, and writing heartwarming stories about good people. So despite the lack of trophies, I've had some fabulous stories. The bad ones to write have been tough to write, but it's your job to write them. I got on well with Joe, but we would have fights occasionally. Joe Harvey, you've got to do it. You've got to be professional. And you know what? You've got to have guts in this game. If you haven't got guts, whether you're a manager, player, or a hack, don't do the job.
John, I've got Dodo Bird has come with a story about you now. So this is about you, not Malcolm. So Malcolm can breathe a sigh of relief because Dodo Bird's coming with this one. Years ago, I was talking football at the bar in Gray's Club with John Gibson. Great guy. Bought me drinks all night. Even said I had nice hair. We danced for a while, but afterwards was a total blank. I was found Sunday morning, the next day, trouserless, directing traffic across the Swing Bridge by a milkman in his cart making deliveries. Police didn't press charges, but ever since then I've wondered how I ended up there. Perhaps John could possibly fill me in. That's if he's not already done so.
Well, the only reason why the story might have a smidgen of truth is that he mentioned Gray's Club, and I certainly went in there now and again just to be social, you understand. And what also gives the story credence is that he was found trouserless because obviously he was wearing the pair of trousers that Malcolm MacDonald had sold him. And they fell apart. So the story has obviously got some truth in it. I can't remember dancing.
Buying it, but I bet you can't remember buying anybody a drink for that all night.
Not all night. I can't remember dancing with him, but he must have asked nicely, else I wouldn't have danced. So that's part of it. Yeah. And I certainly wasn't driving the horse and cart, but the rest of it has all got little smatterings of truth because I led a rather colourful life when I was younger.
It sounds to me like if he's ended up trouserless, he's been clubbing with Ron McGarry because he tells a few tales about clubs he was in back in the day. But that's for another show.
One used to pay me a regular amount of money for them not to appear in print.
I bet he did. He's told me a few, by the way. Keith Rule says, lads, what are your thoughts on reports linking Man United's Phil Jones to a transfer to Newcastle? Do you think he would improve the team? Malcolm?
I've certainly not seen any of these reports. And I can't even imagine that such a transaction would take place in the winter window. I'm always very, very wary of a club like Newcastle getting players from these big clubs. It's sort of when they're a bit on the way down, and I don't think you ever see the best from those players anymore. And so
you're right, Malcolm. You're right. We've done it many times. We did it with Michael Owen. We did it famously with Barnes and Rush out in the old days out of Liverpool. What fabulous players they were, but they weren't. They aren't now.
Yeah. I mean, because Mick Shannon came and played, didn't he?
Yes, John? He did on loan. He did. But the one thing that gives that story a little bit of credence is that if you remember, we are looking, it might surprise people with the number of centre-halves we've had, but we were looking for a central defender. If you remember, in the last window, we tried to sign Rob Holding on loan from Arsenal, and they pulled the plug on it at the last moment because Arteta decided that Holding might do a job where he is, and of course has stayed in the Arsenal team since. So we are looking for a centre-half, and Man U's his old club, and the possibility is that Steve Bruce would ask after him. I don't know how much you would improve the team, and like Malcolm, I'm always cynical when we go for people on their reputation, because we've done that so often, and big names have come to Newcastle well past their sell-by date, and I'm very concerned that Phil Jones would be that. The only way he would come in January is if he came on loan. They certainly would not. Ashley wouldn't condone any spending of money in the January transfer loan. It would be loans again.
If you're looking for a specific position to fill, what you want to bring in Newcastle's situation is somebody who's got his future in front of him, and somebody who's really hungry to prove a point and to make the very most of himself. What I want to see is a hunger. And I can't believe that Phil Jones arriving at St James's Park is going to be very hungry to want to make a name for himself on Tyneside. He's already done all of that.
Good point.
Well, good points, great stuff. Half an hour into the show, we've covered loads of things, including trousers and trouserless people. Tom Dixon says, Malcolm, what's your thoughts on the World Cup draw? I couldn't believe it, to be honest, when it came out again. We ended up with Poland again. That, just as a reminder, we'll just run through England's group here. England have got Poland, Hungary, Albania, Andorra, and San Marino. That's as good as a bye, Mal, isn't it?
It should be. Poland are certainly not the side that they used to be in the 70s and 80s. They were a fantastic side back then, great players there, but they've gone distinctly backwards in the last couple of decades. And Hungary, they haven't been a force since the 1950s, when Ferenc Puskás was playing for them. I can't see any of the others being a problem. So, not quite a buy, but almost.
Okay, John, it's an interesting group. International football, I still feel, has a long way to go to recapture the feel that we had in probably 1990 when our Gaza, Beardsley and Waddle were playing. But it's English football. It's World Cup qualification. It's important. It's an easy group.
Yeah, I think without a shadow of doubt. But if you look back, Steve, over recent times, we always qualify easily from groups. It's when we get to the finals we have our problems. When we get to the World Cup finals or the Europeans, that's when we have our problems. We qualify from groups with almost 100% record or an unbeaten record, because at that stage it's easy. And Hungary, as Malcolm said, since we played Újpest-Dózsa, their great years was the 50s with Puskás, and they hung on into the 60s when Újpest-Dózsa were a great side, and then that was the end of it. Poland was the famous games, as we know, that England had back in the 70s. The only worry with Poland is they have a certain centre forward that plays his club football in Germany, Lewandowski. Yeah. Who might provide a few problems, but England ought to qualify from their group as leaders and qualify automatically. The other three home nations may have to use the playoffs in the hope to get there: Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, because Scotland have got Denmark and Austria, Israel from the whole group. Scotland don't blow anybody away. Northern Ireland's got Italy and Switzerland. Italy are well favourites to win their group. And Wales have got Belgium, who are the world's number one as things stand. So any hope for the other countries may well be via the playoffs, but England should qualify, and then the real problems come once they've qualified.
Yeah, and let's not forget that England actually beat Belgium just recently.
Yeah, they did. They got cuffed in the return. They got cuffed in the return, though, Malcolm. Yes,
I know.
Yeah, they did.
It's crazy. They beat the world number one, and then they go to Denmark, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, it's all right beating people in. It's all right beating people in friendlies, but when it comes to the main events, like John says, we always fall short.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, it's a bit like Newcastle United, isn't it? Newcastle win at West Ham and then go at home to Brighton and get beat.
Yeah,
that's England. That's England with Belgium. Yes,
I think that's why I don't have as much interest in England's games, because I'm a Newcastle fan. One team doing that to you is bad enough without supporting a national team that does the same.
Fair comment, Steve.
Big shout out to our sponsors, newworkwear.com, specialists in the supply and branding of clothing for the workplace, who are sponsoring the StreamYard application for us this month. And I've had a few shout outs already, but qtechshop.co.uk are sponsoring us as well, makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend in Newcastle, and they've kindly done a limited run of Newcastle's Supermac 9 t-shirts and the mugs as well. So if you're looking for Christmas ideas for kids, dads, granddads, uncles, whatever, aunties, sisters, mothers, whatever, whoever wants one, give us a shout at newcastlelegends.com and you will be able to get them on there. Dave Avery.
Steve?
Yes.
But with my photograph stuck on that, are they calling me a mug?
I'll rephrase it. It's a cup. It's a cup.
That's better, Steve. That's better, my friend.
It's a cup. The good news is that it's a rollover on the Malcolm Dog betting scandal story here, because it's 1836. And I think we had somebody on 1836. Nobody went for 1837. I think one person, Paul Oxley, hedged his bets He said it was 5-4 on that he was going off, 20-1 that he would last a full show. So if anyone had that, fair play. Dave Avery, taking us back in time, Malcolm. What's your memories of when you were on Superstars? Great series that back in the 70s, and you did very well on it. He's talking about the 100-meter race.
Yeah, that was a bizarre time. It really was. The Superstars event in all was quite fantastic. You know, when the first one that I did was the one that I won, and it was over in Malmö in Sweden, and I was the only English person taking part, and there were so many great sportsmen from all different sports that. Giacomo Agostini, who was 13 times world champion at 500cc motorbike racing. And then there was Angelo Nieto from Spain, who was a 250cc world champion 4 times. Jochen Mass, the racing driver, the Formula One racing driver, he was there. Willy Steveniers, who was one of the top basketball players from America, albeit he was Belgian. Oh my word. And it just went. Harm Kuipers, who was, he had been a gold medalist in the Olympics on cycling, sprint cycling, and then he gave that up. And he turned to speed skating and won gold medals in that. You know, these were incredible people to be a part of. And there was the local lad from Sweden who was the Swedish table tennis champion. And it came to the 100 meters, and this was one event that I fancied myself for. And I've been doing fairly well up to then, and so I really wanted to get stuck into this event, and we got ourselves all positioned at the starting line, and it was ready, set, and up we came. And the table tennis champion, he just took off. And then the gun went off, and then it went off again, and he was full started, and then he full started again in the next one. And we said, well, that's it, he's out. You know, that you get 2 chances, and I think it's only I don't think it's 2 chances anymore, is it? I think if you full start, you're out straight away. But in those days, you got a second chance. But he full started twice. And so the television people, they came into the argument, and they said, because we record in a totally different order to the way it goes out on air, we can't suddenly start messing about with this. So we've got to have the original starting lineup no matter what. Well, this guy was he was so keyed up and knew that I was very strong in this, and that he needed a really good start if he was going to have any chance, and he just kept full starting, and it got to the 9th time that we started off, and he was 9 meters up the track before the gun went off. I went off out of the blocks expecting to hear the gun again, and I didn't hear it. It wasn't fired, and I thought, bloody hell, they've let this one go. And so I had a fella 10 meters ahead of me, and I had sort of like 90 meters or so to catch him up and beat him. And I just nipped in front of him right on the line. And having done so, Ron Pickering, the great athletics coach who was a commentator on Superstars, he was up in the stand, and he waved to me, and he signalled for me to go up and see him. So I went up, and he said, "Are you aware of the time you've just done?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Well," he said, "you've just run 10:4." He said, and that's not only a Superstars record, he said, but it's the second fastest in the world this year. I said, "I beg your pardon." He said, "There's only one man, and it was an Italian, who had run quicker than that in that particular year." He said, "So you could represent any country other than Italy in the Olympics." I said, "Oh, very good." He said, "Except that you were a professional." And it was in a really condescending way that he said it, because athletics in those days was strictly amateur. But yeah, so Ron Pickering, what he said to me was, he said, "As a sprint coach," he said, "I can take a half a second absolute minimum of anybody in their time." He said, "when I work with them," he said, "so I would have you down to at least a maximum of 9.9. And the world record at the time was 9.9. And I went, "Oh, wow." And he said, "Yeah, but then you're a pro." He said, "So I'm not getting involved."
Brilliant.
Yeah. Steve, you know why Malcolm was so quick? Because his dogs was chasing him.
Brilliant stuff. Paul, but Paul's going to take. Go on, Mal. Go on.
Well, I was going to say that my speed stood me in very good stead for the vast majority of my career, but there were certain linesmen that I had to sort of hold myself back somewhat when the ball was played through beyond the back four. I couldn't go in that split second after the ball was played, because the linesman had to do that. They would see the ball played, and then they would turn and look along the line. Well, if I went straight away as soon as the ball was played, I was offside. And there was one particular linesman who was from Middlesbrough, and we got him numerous games at St James, and he was forever flagging me offside, and I'm saying, "I'm not. You're too slow in looking from the ball to the line." And he kept flagging me offside, and so I had to give myself like another 3 or 4 yards, and sort of retreated 3 or 4 yards from the line of the defenders, so that I could give him the chance to sort of turn his head. And it was crazy, you know, that speed, it counted for you in most instances, but at times it could count against you very much.
Okay, we're going to look ahead to the West Brom game now, last 15 minutes of the show. Chipper is saying we're at home against the worst team in the league on Saturday. If we play 5 at the back and 1 up top, it shows our intentions, or lack of them. So Paul's asking the $1 million question.
I couldn't agree more with that comment. I really couldn't.
If he's fit, lads, John, I'll come to you first. Would you start ESM?
Great question. If you could start the man who was with us before he got his 6-year contract, you would start him, because he would be the main hope Newcastle United have, because he's the one bloke that can do something different. Every other player is predictable in what he does. He's not. but the form he's played in recent times has been so awful. His body language has been so awful. Is that because he was played at 10 and not played out wide? And of course, in the last game, he didn't play. Was it a bust up with Steve Bruce, or was he genuinely injured? Because there was talk that he was going to be left out the team anyway, and the one without him. I think the only answer to that, and I'm not ducking it, is how he's looked in training this week. If he's got his appetite back, if he's buzzing and he's positive, he's about the third name on the team sheet after the centre forward and the goalkeeper. If he is sulking, then you don't need him anywhere near the place. And of course, the other thing is we've got to hope that he's not one of the coronavirus victims, because he may not be available to us. But it is an excellent question, because in the right frame of mind, he's a match winner, and outside of Callum Wilson, we haven't got match winners. In the wrong frame of mind, he's a liability. So, great question. But what we've got to do is what we did, at least what we did at Palace, which is play a flat back four, an extra body in midfield, and two up top, because we are playing a woeful side. This West Brom team have let in 23 goals this season, which is the most in the whole of the Premier League. They've leaked three goals or more on 4 occasions, and Everton and Crystal Palace have both scored 5 against them. At the other end of the field, they've only scored 8 in 11 games, which is the second worst record in the Premier League. What does that tell us? It tells me they can't keep them out and they can't put them in. We're playing a dreadful, dreadful side. We've got to get our tactics right. 5 at the back would be sacrilege against a team of their limited ability. We've got to go for their throat, and we haven't got to use the excuse of the coronavirus. If we've got a keeper and we've got a centre forward, let's put the rest of the team round them. Let's start the game, lads. We've got to start the game as we mean it. We start sometimes like a hesitant tortoise that wants to go back in its shell. We almost kick off and go to our 18-yard line and start defending. We have got to get... not in one game this season have we had more possession than the opposition. And that includes when we won at Crystal Palace in the last game. We've always had under 50%. We've got to take the game to West Brom. If we can't beat West Brom and we can't beat Fulham, who is our next home game, then we are in serious trouble, mind. These are sides you beat. These are sides you beat.
On that, John. Yes.
Ferry Hill Mag says, ASM, don't start for me. Lazy player. Frustrating. You know what sort of game he's going to have within the first few minutes of games. So there's Ferry Hill Mag's opinion, Malcolm.
Yeah, well, I was just going to follow on from what John was saying. You know, when you think that that Newcastle, they go to Crystal Palace and win 2-0, and then a week later, Crystal Palace go to West Brom and win 5-0. You know, so what does that say that Newcastle should do to West Brom, for heaven's sake?
Yeah.
And sorry, what was the guy's question just there that you asked, Steve?
No, he was just criticising. ESM. He said he wouldn't put him in the team.
Right. Well, there is one thing that I despise in the game, and that is when I see a player being brilliant, earning a new contract, signing that contract, and then he's not brilliant anymore. I absolutely despise that, and the player, and it's obvious that the player is just relaxing, counting his damn money, and they should take the stance that if you sign a new contract, you should get better. You should always be seeking to improve, not to rest on your laurels, not to count the money in your bank, for heaven's sake. You should be getting out there. St. Maximin, he should be looking to score somewhere in the region of between 15 and 20 goals in the season. And what's he got so far? A couple?
One in the league, Malcolm. One in the league.
Yes, and we're approaching the new year. So we're halfway through the season almost. So that isn't good enough. It really isn't good enough. With that ability, he should be so hungry to get out and just keep scoring goals, making goals. And so if he's not in that frame of mind to really want to go out and murder the opposition, leave him out, because he will be a liability.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should just stick with what we've got. But obviously, COVID will decide on that. Lots of opinions coming in on this. Tom says ASM has bought some new football boots today. I wonder if he's going to play better wearing them. As long as he hasn't bought a leather jacket and trousers down at some kind of dodgy shop in Newcastle. John Brown says, did anyone see Lampard's interview last week when he said it's the big six after 10 games near the top, then apologised and said, sorry, the top six I meant. Yeah, he did say that. I did see that as well. It was interesting, wasn't it, John? Was it a Freudian slip?
Yeah, well, I think they know that they consider themselves the big six. I mean, when you look at the so-called big six, who undoubtedly believe they're the big six, Arsenal are 2 places below Newcastle in 15th place, but they're still part of the big six. Is that because of the gates they get, because of their history, because of what Wenger did with them? On the current form, they're closer to the bottom six than the big six. But this is a real bone of contention for Newcastle United fans, because we know that the big six, so-called, don't want us to join them and be the big seven, which is the takeover, etc., etc. And I'm sorry, I don't want to go for the big six situation. And if we look at it now, of course, guys, they talk about the big six, but what about Leicester City? What about Southampton? What about Wolves on the verge of it? I mean, Leicester City won the title not so long ago, and now they're batting now. And, you're not showing a lot of respect for the achievement of those sort of clubs.
Absolutely right, John. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But for there to be this cartel developing in the Premier League, I think it is so dangerous, because they're banding together against everybody else. The point of a football league is that it's competitive. They shouldn't be banding together. What's next? Are they going to say? Are they going to start stitching games up? For heaven's sake! For me, it's bordering on going against the rules of football, and I think the whole thing just absolutely stinks. And the Premier League, they are siding with the big six. Now that's the most dangerous aspect of it all, because it's almost as if it's a power breakaway. The Football League is there to represent 20 clubs, and they should represent each and every one equally. Not start taking sides. That isn't the way to do it. And from here on, I don't feel that I can trust the Premier League to do the right thing for the game of football and for their members, the 20 clubs that are there. I really don't. They've broken all confidence and any confidence that I once had in them.
Yeah, it's a terrible state of affairs, and it's affected the takeover. More importantly for us, and I think the truth will out. I think the truth will out, Malcolm.
Yeah. I think it's an absolute outrage for them to affect a club's business, major business, in that way. I really do. And I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing whether Mike Ashley can actually get this into court, because I think a judge, an experienced business judge, he will see right through the Big Six and the Premier League, and I think he will absolutely crucify them verbally.
Yeah, me too. I think that's where we'll go. Well, I think that's where we'll look as if we're going. I think this will get settled way before that. I don't think the Premier League will want a dirty linen aired in public. I
agree with you, Steve. Yeah, they won't want it.
It might take time. My money's on, maybe spring next year at the latest. But I think we'll get a takeover. I think, John, for us, just finishing off before we finish the show, a takeover would be more beneficial in January for us, of course.
Oh, absolutely, because we could do something in January. And as we approach the festive season, what is interesting, Steve, is this has been a dreadful year for us all, because of the pandemic to hit the whole world. It's been dreadful. It's kept the most loyal fans in football, 50,000 of them, outside of the cathedral on the hill. We have seen a takeover which we thought was going to open the doors to heaven collapse, at least temporarily. It has been a bad year. We need to get into a new year, get the crowds back in, get a takeover back on the go, and get Newcastle heading upwards again. So I would prefer, rather to look back and have a glass that's half empty, I would prefer to look forward to 2021, 22 and have a glass that's all full. And I think there's a good chance of that. But let us, before this year's ended, get 6 points out of West Brom and Fulham in the next two home games, please.
Give us your prediction for West Brom, John, please.
Well, as I've said, they can't keep goals out the back of their net and they can't score goals. Which must indicate that whatever team Newcastle put out, as long as we've got the front and back reasonably sorted, Newcastle should win. I can't ever see Newcastle scoring 5 unless we're in the League Cup against Morecambe or someone. So I'm going to go that Newcastle will win 2-0, because they're poor as we are good.
Brilliant. Malcolm?
I would think that if the players are worth their salt, having been in lockdown and not being able to train and what have you, I would imagine that they've got back to the training ground. And I think it was is it today that they were able to train for the first time, that they would be absolutely busting a gut to get out on the pitch again and go and murder somebody. So I'm going to go with that Newcastle will murder West Brom, and that I take your point, John, that Newcastle are not prolific goal scorers, but nevertheless, I'm going to go for 3-0, which is a high score line for Newcastle.
It is. Good stuff. Very positive predictions from the guys. We are running a campaign called Think Before You Tweet. Those of you who maybe saw last night's show will know that the documentary's been finished. It's 2 hours long, and I'll be launching that on the 15th of December, looking at the problems that we have as a fan base with social media, looking and meeting some of the trolls themselves who were kind enough to come onto camera and talk about why they actually do it, and also speaking to a well-renowned politician, someone who works in a school and has to deal with kids and social media, and also with a guy who runs a mental health organisation down in Scunthorpe who was targeted by people and almost took his own life. So it's a fascinating documentary, a look into social media and trolling in particular, concentrating obviously on our fan base and why people do it. I think people will enjoy that. But we are doing a Think Before You Tweet campaign. We'll play out with the video. I just want to thank John and Malcolm for a great show. Really enjoyed that, guys. The hour flew over. Thanks very much, lads.
Pleasure.
Ciao, fellas.
Good night, everybody.
Cheers,
Bye-bye
guys. Great to have the lads on, and please, if you want to subscribe to the channel, click subscribe, give this video a share, and also give the video a like. We rely on that. And thanks to Keith and someone else who made a couple of donations tonight. If you click the little $sign, you can donate to the show. It goes to improving it and keeping the shows going. So thanks very much for doing that. We will be back tomorrow night with the three amigos. Unfortunately, we won't be live to pre-record. I'm unavailable tomorrow to do the show live, so will be a pre-record, but still 90 minutes of the three amigos, and we're about to record that now. So we'll play out with the video. Take care, and let's hope it's 3 points at the weekend.